The teller at TD on 109th Street has known me for 11 years. She used to ask after my wife by name before Greta passed. That Tuesday in February, I walked in just before noon with my coat still dusted with snow from the parking lot and slid my bank card across the counter the way I'd done 1,000 times before. I needed $450, $200 for my blood pressure prescription, and the rest for the plumber coming Thursday. Simple. In and out. She started typing, then she stopped. She typed again, slower this time. Her eyes moved to the screen and didn't come back to me the way they usually did. "Mr. Gable," she said very quietly, "can you come with me for just a moment?" I laughed. "Phyllis, it's me. What's the matter?" She didn't laugh back. She came around the counter and touched my elbow gently, the way a person does when they're not sure how much weight you can take. She led me to a small office off to the side, the kind with frosted glass and a round table that smells like printer toner, and she closed the door. "Your account balance," she said. "I need you to look at something. There should have been $178,000 in that account. The proceeds from selling the acreage outside Leduc, combined with the RRSP I'd cashed out after I retired from the union. 31 years as a pipe fitter with Local 488, and every dollar I'd set aside was sitting in that account. It was everything." The balance on the printout she set in front of me was $812. I read it 3 times. The number didn't change. "There has to be a mistake," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from the other end of a hallway. She put a second sheet on the table, rows of e-transfers going back 6 months. Amounts that started at $3,000 and climbed $8,000, $15,000, $22,000, all of them with the same recipient name. Nadine Kowalski, my daughter. Before I take you back to that office and what happened next, I want to ask you to take a second and subscribe, if you haven't already, and leave me a comment telling me where in Canada you're watching from. I read every single one. Now let me start from the beginning, because this story doesn't make sense without it. My name is Norman Gable. I'm 54 years old. I live in Sherwood Park, just east of Edmonton. And 2 years ago, I buried the woman I loved for 27 years. Greta had ovarian cancer. She fought it for 16 months and never once complained in a way that made me feel sorry for her. She complained in a way that made me feel like we were in it together, which is the kind of woman she was. When she passed, I was lost. I won't dress that up. I have 2 children. My daughter Nadine is 41. She lives in Vancouver with her husband Conrad. She works in real estate development, pre-construction condos, investment properties, the kind of thing that has a lot of zeros attached and requires a lot of lunches with people in expensive suits. She and Conrad have a nice place in Kitsilano, a car that's too low to the ground for Canadian winters, and a life that looked, from a distance, like it was doing very well. My son Liam is 32. He manages the plumbing and hardware section at Canadian Tire in Sherwood Park and lives 15 minutes from my front door. He came over twice a week during Greta's illness. He was the one who drove her to the Cross Cancer Institute for treatments when I couldn't hold myself together enough to drive. He shovels my walkway before I even know it's snowed. He calls to ask if I've eaten, not to check a box, but because he actually wants to know. The family always had its way of seeing my 2 kids. Nadine was the one who made it out, went to university in Ontario, built a career, married a man whose LinkedIn profile runs 3 paragraphs long. My brother-in-law Percy used to say it at every Christmas dinner, that Nadine, she's something else. And I was proud. I am her father. Liam was the one who stayed. And in this family, staying was quietly treated as a kind of failure. After Greta died, Nadine flew in for the funeral and stayed 4 days. She handled things efficiently. The funeral home, the catering, the thank you cards. She was very good at efficiency. On the last morning before her flight back, she sat across from me at the kitchen table with her laptop open and said she thought it made sense for her to be added to my main account. Just so I can help manage things from a distance, Dad. The bills, the investments, the tax stuff. You've got enough on your plate without worrying about the paperwork. She squeezed my hand. Liam's great for the practical things, but finances aren't really his world. I let her do it. God help me, I let her. She set up online access. She said she'd check in monthly. I felt like I was being taken care of. I went back to grieving. There was one thing I didn't think about until I was sitting in that back office at TD with Phyllis watching my face. About 3 months after Greta died, our family lawyer, A man named Jeffrey, who'd handled Greta's estate, had left me a message I never returned. Something about the account. Something I filed under. I'll get to that, and didn't. I drove home with the printout on the passenger seat. At every red light on the white mood I looked at it, like the numbers might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then I called Nadine. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted her, "Call me. It's about my account. Important." An hour later my phone rang. Not Nadine, Percy. "Norman, just heard you've been having some trouble with your finances. Nadine called us. She's very worried about you. And about Liam." A pause that was too long to be accidental. "Said Liam's been asking you for cash. For repairs and things that aren't getting done." My stomach turned to ice. I set the phone face down on Greta's tablecloth and sat very still. Nadine hadn't just taken the money. She'd already built the story around it. She'd handed the family a villain, and that villain was my son. The next morning I went back to the bank and asked to speak to the branch manager. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I said another word to anyone. The manager was careful and polite. She explained that when Nadine was added to the account as a joint holder, not just an authorized user, but a joint holder, the legal picture changed entirely. Either party could withdraw any amount, at any time, without the other's knowledge. On paper, Nadine hadn't stolen anything. She'd withdrawn from an account she co-owned. I heard those words and felt something go very quiet inside me. I drove to Jeffrey's office that afternoon. He's on Jasper Avenue, up 2 flights of stairs above a dry cleaner's, a small place with a good coffee maker, and 40 years of case files on the shelves. He stood when I came in and shook my hand with both of his. "Norman," he said, "I've been trying to reach you." I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, fingers laced on the desk. When I finished, he was quiet a long moment. Then he said, "I can't tell you everything Greta and I discussed. Privilege doesn't end when a client does. You understand that." "Greta?" That stopped me cold. What does Greta have to do with this? He took off his glasses and set them on the desk and looked at me directly. "Before she passed, your wife came to see me, more than once. She was worried about Nadine's relationship with money, and about what might happen if she went on your account." He paused. "She didn't tell you because she didn't want to put you in a position of choosing sides based on a feeling. So she did some quiet things instead, to protect you." I had to put my hand flat on his desk to steady myself. "What things?" He almost smiled. "I can't say yet. It isn't mine to tell. But I can tell you this. Your wife left instructions for when this day came, and it's come." I left with more questions than I'd arrived with. But for the first time since that office at TD, there was something other than dread in my chest. Greta had seen this coming. From the other side of everything, she was still looking out for me. Meanwhile, the phone kept ringing. Percy's wife called, sympathetic and careful. Had I thought about talking to someone, given everything with the money and the stress of losing Greta? Nadine had mentioned I'd been a bit confused lately. Liam's name came up in 3 separate conversations that week, always wrapped in the same careful pity. Liam means well, of course. It must be hard, with Liam being so close to this situation. The implication, never quite spoken, that my son had been bleeding me quietly, and Nadine was the one holding things together from 1,000 miles away. I didn't tell Liam. Not yet. I needed to understand the full picture before I said anything that could be turned around. Nadine finally called 4 days after the bank visit. "Dad." Her voice was warm, unhurried, the voice she used in presentations. "I hear you've been asking questions about the account. I just want to make sure you're not working yourself up over nothing." $177,000, I said. "That's not nothing, Nadine." A pause, the warmth cooled just slightly. "I'm a joint account holder, Dad. I've been managing things the way we agreed. There are expenses you don't always see." "Tell me what expenses. Tell me where $177,000 went." She didn't answer that. Instead, her voice dropped into something low and almost gentle, which was the most unsettling thing she'd done yet. "Dad, I need you to be careful here. You're still grieving. Your memory isn't what it was. Even you've said that. If you start making accusations, people are going to be concerned. They're going to wonder if you're managing on your own." She paused. "You know what that looks like." There it was. Not my daughter. A threat wearing my daughter's voice. I'm just reading the statements, I said. Get some rest, Dad. We'll talk when you're thinking more clearly. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen in the dark, the phone still warm in my hand, and felt something settle in my chest. Cold, certain, and done being afraid. The only way through this was forward. 2 days later, Conrad called. In 20 years, Conrad had never once called me on his own. He was the kind of man who gave firm handshakes and spent the first 10 minutes of every visit talking about real estate markets, and then ran out of things to say. Norman, his voice was tight. I need you to back off whatever you're doing. Nadine is under enormous pressure right now. She emptied my retirement savings, Conrad. He caught himself, but a beat too late. The development deal fell through. The pre-sale project we'd been working on for 2 years. The financing pulled out in the spring. We're behind on the mortgage. The bank sent a default notice, a long breath. She said it was temporary, that she'd put everything back before you noticed. She called it a loan. He stopped, and I understood. Nadine wasn't greedy. She was drowning. The Kitsilano condo, the nice car, the lunches with investors, all of it was a woman holding her breath underwater, and my RRSP was the last heir in the room. It didn't make it right, not even close. She'd robbed her father and she'd pinned it on her brother. But it made her human, and somehow that was worse. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my kitchen knowing my daughter wasn't a monster in this story. She was a desperate woman, which made her so much more dangerous. I need to pause here. If you've ever been a parent who handed something over to a child you trusted and felt the ground move under your feet, you know the specific cold I felt standing in that kitchen. If this story is landing somewhere for you, go ahead and hit subscribe so you're there when I tell you how it ends. And tell me in the comments, has anyone in your family ever done something that made you question everything you thought you knew about them? Now let me tell you about Greta. Jeffrey called me back and asked me to come in. I brought Liam. I'd told him everything by then. The account, the printouts, the calls, his sister's lies. He sat in my truck for a few minutes after I finished and looked straight ahead at the parking lot. Then he said, "Okay, Dad, what do we do?" Jeffrey met us at the door. He made coffee. Then he opened a leather folder on his desk, with the careful hands of a man who had been waiting a long time to open it. Greta was a careful woman, he said, smarter than most people gave her credit for. I know it, I said. About 8 months before she passed, she came to see me. She'd watched Nadine for a long time, watched how she talked about money, watched how she handled her own, and she was worried about what would happen after she was gone. He paused. She said, and I'm quoting, "Jeffrey, I won't be around to keep an eye on things. I need you to keep an eye on things for me." I had to look away. That was Greta. Word for word, that was her. "So we did 2 things, Jeffrey said quietly. "They've been sitting in this folder, waiting." He looked at Liam, then back at me. "First 30 days before Greta died, on her instruction, we filed a legal notice with your bank revoking Nadine's status as joint account holder. The bank was notified in writing. Nadine was removed." The room was very still. "Which means," I said slowly, "which means every single e-transfer on that printout, every one of them dated after the revocation, was made by someone with no legal authority over that account." He set his pen down. "That is not a family disagreement. That is something a Crown attorney will be very interested in." Liam's hand found my shoulder. "Second," Jeffrey continued, "Greta instructed me to place the proceeds from the Leduc acreage sale into a protected family trust. Neither child can touch it unilaterally. It requires a trustee." He looked at Liam directly. "She named you." Liam said nothing. He just stared at the desk. I turned to look at my son, 32 years old, in his work shirt, who had driven his mother to chemotherapy and shoveled my driveway every winter without being asked, who the family had always called the one who never made anything of himself. "She knew," I said. Liam nodded slowly. Then his jaw got tight and he had to look at the window. "She never said a word to me." "She didn't want to make it a war," Jeffrey said gently. "She wanted to protect your father, and she wanted to do it where it couldn't be whispered away afterward, in front of people." He looked at me. She was very specific about that. That weekend, Nadine announced she was throwing me a retirement party. The official one. I'd been retired over a year, but she said we'd never done it properly. She'd booked a private room at the Keg on 109th Street, invited 30 people. Percy and his wife, cousins, neighbors I'd known for 20 years. Old friends from the union. She told everyone it was a celebration. I found out the way I found out everything now. Secondhand. Percy's wife mentioned it on the phone, assuming I already knew. Isn't that wonderful? She said. Nadine's going all out for her dad. I understood exactly what it was. A stage. Nadine standing in front of everyone who mattered in my world, playing the devoted daughter before any of them had a chance to hear anything else. And Liam. Liam would be the shadow in the corner. The one who meant well. She called that evening. Dad, about Saturday. I think it's probably better if Liam doesn't come. He's been making things tense, and I don't want anything to spoil your night. Liam will be there, I said. He's my son. Dad, please. People are already talking about your judgment. I'll see you Saturday, Nadine. I called Jeffrey after I hung up. He was quiet a moment. Then, Norman, I'll have everything ready, and if you'll allow it, I'd like to be in that room. At the party? In the room, he said, when the time comes. Your wife wanted it done in the open, where no one could change the story afterward. I didn't know yet exactly what Greta had prepared, but I was about to find out in front of every person I knew. Saturday came cold and clear, the way Edmonton February nights do. Liam drove us. I came into the keg with my son on my left, and a quiet in my chest that had nothing to do with calm. The room was full, white tablecloths, a welcome banner in gold letters, everyone dressed up and warm from the bar. Faces I'd known for decades, and I saw the way those faces shifted when I walked in with Liam beside me. Nadine was across the room. She crossed the floor quickly, kissed my cheek, smiled at the room. He made it, everyone. And then lo, just for me, I asked you not to bring him. He's my son, I said. Same as you're my daughter. I brought him. Nadine reset her smile and moved back through the crowd. Conrad stood near the bar, looking at the floor. In the back corner, almost hidden, Jeffrey sat alone with his leather folder on the table. He caught my eye and gave one small nod. Liam put his hand on my arm. Wait for it, Dad. Nadine tapped a fork against her glass and stepped to the front of the room. The restaurant noise, from the other side of the wall, went quiet. Thank you all for being here, she began. My dad worked hard his whole life. 31 years in the trades, winters on job sites, building this province one pipe at a time. Warm murmurs from the crowd. And family, she continued, means showing up for the people we love, especially when things get complicated, especially when someone close to us isn't acting in their best interests. She let that hang. Her eyes touched mine, soft and worried. The loving daughter worried about her failing dad. It's been a hard year. Some of you know there have been concerns about Dad's accounts, about money that's gone missing. I've been trying to handle it quietly to protect this family. But I think the people in this room deserve to know the truth about who's been taking advantage of a grieving man. The whisper started, and this time 30 heads turned, slowly, carefully, the way a crowd does when they've already been told where to look. Every face turned toward Liam. I felt my son go rigid beside me. He didn't move, he just stood there and let it happen, because he'd learned a long time ago that dignity costs less than a scene. I stood up. It took me a moment, 54 years old and my knees have opinions. Liam steadied me without a word. You're right about one thing, Nadine, I said. My voice came out level. Someone took money from me. And I think it's time everyone in this room saw exactly who, in writing, with dates and dollar amounts. I nodded toward the back of the room. Jeffrey stood and walked forward with his folder. The color left Nadine's face. Jeffrey set a stack of pages on the center table. The bank statements, highlighted, organized by date. My name is Jeffrey Park. I've been this family's lawyer for 18 years. With Norman's permission, I'm going to read from the account history. You're welcome to pass these around afterward. This is completely unnecessary, Nadine said. Her voice had climbed. Dad's confused. He doesn't understand. January 9th, Jeffrey read, steady as a man reading a weather report. E-transfer out, $15,000. Recipient, Nadine Kowalski. The room went still. January 24th, $8,000. Nadine Kowalski. February 6th, $22,000. February 20th, $18,000. He turned the page. March 3rd, $31,000. Each number landed in the silence, like something dropped into still water. I watched it move across the room. Percy's hand stopped halfway to his glass. My old union steward was staring at the page, being slid toward him. It's a joint account, Nadine said loudly. I had every right. No one said it was illegal, Nadine. I kept my voice quiet, the way Greta used to when she meant something. I'm saying it happened. These aren't accusations. These are dates and dollar amounts. Read them yourselves. The pages moved hand to hand around the room. You told them it was Liam, I said. You told this whole family that your brother was robbing a grieving man, while your name was on every single transfer. Nadine looked around the room. The friendly faces she'd been working all evening had changed into something she wasn't prepared for. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it, said Percy. He was holding one of the pages and his voice was flat. Explain this to me, Nadine. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Into that silence, Jeffrey said, "There's more." He drew out the second set of documents from the folder. These ones older, printed on the heavier paper of formal legal filings. 8 months before she passed, Greta Gable came to my office. She was worried about her daughter's relationship with money. She was worried about what would happen to her husband after she was gone. So she did two things. He looked around the room. First, 30 days before her death, Greta legally revoked Nadine's status as joint account holder on this account. The bank was notified in writing. Nadine was removed. A sound moved through the room, not quite a gasp, but close. Which means every transfer on those pages was made after the revocation, by someone with no legal authority over that account. He paused. That is not a family disagreement. That is something a Crown attorney will be very interested in. Nadine's glass was shaking. She set it on the nearest table. Second, Jeffrey continued, Greta placed the acreage sale proceeds into a protected family trust. She named a trustee, the person she believed would guard her husband's welfare if the day ever came. He turned and looked at Liam. 30 heads turned with him. She named her son. Liam stood absolutely still. I could see from where I was that his jaw was tight and his eyes were full. Across the room, Nadine looked at her brother. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost everything, the warmth, the polish, all of it gone. Mom knew, Liam said quietly. It wasn't a question. For a moment, Nadine just stood there, the room wrapped around her in silence. Then her composure broke all at once, the way ice goes at the end of March, not slowly, all at once. I was going to pay it back, she said, and her voice was raw and small. Every dollar, I just needed time. The development deal fell apart. The investors pulled out. We were months behind on the mortgage. I panicked. I told myself it was a loan. She looked at me. I was going to put it all back before you ever noticed, Dad. I swear it. You blamed your brother. Percy's wife set her glass down carefully. You called me from Vancouver, Nadine. You sat in my kitchen and told me Liam was taking money from his own father. I panicked. You don't know what it's like to watch everything fall apart and keep smiling at every dinner and every event and pretend it's all fine. So you stole from him. My old union steward's voice was flat, from a 54-year-old man who just buried his wife. Nadine turned to me. Her eyes were red and desperate. Dad, tell them. No, my voice came out clear, steadier than I'd felt in months. Your mother didn't set anything up to hurt you. She set it up to protect me from you, and she was right to do it. Conrad had come in late and stood near the back of the room. He hadn't said one word in her defense. He just looked at the floor. Nadine looked around the room one last time for an ally and found none. Then she set down her glass and she walked out. Conrad followed. The door to the private room swung shut. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then I did something I had needed to do for a long time. I steadied myself on the edge of the table, and I stood as straight as my back would let me. I want to say something about Liam, I said. The room held itself very still. For 2 years, this man has driven me to every appointment I've had. He was in the room when his mother took her last breath because he refused to leave. He shovels my walk before I'm even out of bed. He comes by for no reason other than to make sure I've eaten. My voice caught once, then held, and this family called him the one who never made anything of himself. I looked around the room, slow and deliberate. He made everything that mattered. You just weren't paying attention. Liam was crying. So was I. I won't pretend any different. Percy crossed the room and put both hands on Liam's shoulders. He said, I'm sorry, son. I should have known better. One by one, the room agreed. Jeffrey moved fast in the days that followed. He filed an emergency motion, and within a week, a judge froze every account Nadine still had access to. The trust Greta had protected was already locked tight. Nothing could touch it. That was her doing, and it held. We sat in Jeffrey's office and he laid out the options. I could pursue criminal charges. The withdrawals after the revocation were unauthorized. The Crown would have a straightforward case. I sat with that a long moment, then I shook my head. She's still my daughter, I said. Greta wouldn't want me to put our child in a cell. I want the money back. I want her out of my accounts. I want my son's name cleared, that's all. So Jeffrey built a different road. A structured repayment agreement, signed and binding, in exchange for not pursuing charges. Nadine, facing a criminal charge, signed every page. It wasn't all there. A good deal of it was simply gone, swallowed by the collapsed condo deal and the debt underneath it. But between the trust Greta had protected and the assets Nadine was forced to liquidate, the Kitsilano condo, Conrad's car, a vacation property in the Okanagan they'd been underwater on for 2 years, the numbers came to where they needed to. She repaid just over $100,000 on a schedule Jeffrey enforces to this day. Combined with the trust, it was enough. Enough for the medications and the cardiologist visits, and the aide who comes Tuesday mornings. Enough to stay in the house in Sherwood Park. That drive to a care facility in Bonnyville never happened. Liam used his portion of the trust, the part Greta had earmarked for him, to put a down payment on a small bungalow 10 minutes from my front door. He moved in last September. Nadine moved to Calgary. She and Conrad separated quietly. By spring, she keeps up the repayment mostly. Jeffrey chases her when she doesn't. She sends a card at Christmas and on my birthday, short notes in handwriting that's gotten steadier over time. I read them. I keep them in a drawer in Greta's old desk, alongside the photo from our first summer on the acreage. I haven't answered the last one yet. Some wounds need time before you know what to say. The family didn't all come back at once. Percy was first. He came with his wife and said sorry in a real way, the kind that costs something. Others followed with casseroles and awkward phone calls and the particular shame of people who convicted a good man on one phone call. I accepted every apology. But I said the same thing to each of them. I'm glad you see it different now. But this family is done treating Liam like an afterthought. He earned better from all of us. Some of them took that well. Some kept their distance after. I find I can live with that just fine. It's a smaller circle now, but it's a true one. Every weekday morning, Liam meets me at the Tim Hortons on Baseline Road at 7:30. He gets a large double-double. I get a medium black, which Greta never could talk me out of. We sit at the window and watch Sherwood Park wake up, the school buses, the morning shift turning over at the hospital, February light coming in low and cold and honest. Some mornings my chest is tight, and I take my pills with my coffee and think about how close I came to losing all of it. The house, the independence, the ordinary life I'd spent 31 winters building. And then I look across the table at my son, and I let it go. People ask me sometimes whether watching Nadine fall apart in that room gave me satisfaction. I'll be honest, for a moment it did, an angry father's moment. But that passed, and what's left isn't satisfaction, it's something quieter. The feeling of a man who didn't have to become someone he wasn't in order to win. I won because the truth was on paper. I won because Greta was smarter than all of us and loved me enough to act quietly and trust the right person. I won because I had a son who showed up every single day, without once asking for credit. Here's what I'd tell another father sitting across from me right now, with cold coffee, and a story he doesn't know how to carry. Don't wait. Whatever you're sitting on, don't wait. I spent 2 years letting this family write my son off, and I let it stand because speaking up felt like starting a fight. That silence cost him more than money ever could. And this. Love is not the same as trust. You can love your child completely and still not hand them the keys to your life. Greta knew that. She knew it before I was willing to learn it. It took an empty bank account and a printout in a frosted glass office for me to understand what she already understood. The morning after I wrote all this down, I drove to Tim Hortons a few minutes early. Liam was already there. He'd arrived first and ordered for both of us. His double-double, my black medium, and he was sitting at the window watching the parking lot fill up in the cold. I sat down across from him. He slid my coffee over without a word. Outside, the sky over Alberta was that particular gray that comes before it commits to being either a good day or a hard one. "You good, Dad?" he said. I wrapped both hands around the cup and felt the warmth of it. "Yeah," I said, "I'm good." And I meant it for the first time in a long time, without having to work at it.